And I want to say hello, everybody. We are live right now. It's Lois and Kathleen. And Lois, great to have you here. And as you can see, it just records everything as we're going along. I want to say welcome to everybody. This is Kathleen, and I have Lois. And Lois, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let people know a little bit about what you do.
Okay, I'm Lois Hollis, and my topic is I'm a shame guilt educator, counselor, and filmmaker, which is quite unusual that I decided to make shame and guilt a specific topic because it's that important. And to my knowledge, I'm the only one that has done that.
Okay, and shame and guilt, tell us more about that, what you do with that.
Well, first of all, I help people educate them to the real truth about shame and guilt. And that's the reason why we still carry it, because we don't know this information. I've been very blessed to receive information that's not out there. So first of all, I have to help educate. And that's the beauty of the podcast. If you want to educate, this is what you do.
Well, I have to say, we were talking before we actually went live, and you were sharing with me how many podcast shows that you have booked, and it's all a result of what you implemented from the Podcast Rockstar Club, which is why I'm so glad that you are the featured expert for the very first Facebook Live that we're doing in the Podcast Rockstar group. And we may actually send this all over the internet based on what our conversation is about. But before you joined the Podcast Rockstar Club, had you ever tried to get any interviews?
Okay, about 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago, I decided to go more public with my work because shame and guilt was more or less talked about. Before they would say, oh, we can talk about joy, happiness, and love. We don't talk about shame and guilt. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, that's the problem. So about 3 or 4 years ago, it was getting into the public, and I says, oh, I can finally talk. And I'm not changing my topic. This is my topic. This is my destiny. So I was listening to podcasts, and I said, wow, this is so smart. This is so smart. I love to speak, and I can do this. And a couple of about 4 or 5 of my friends said, oh, Lois, I just started a podcast. Can you talk for me? Because I don't have any. I said, of course, I would love to. So I got on 4 or 5 of my friends' podcasts. Mm-hmm. And that's easy, right?
Right.
Hi, Lois. You can, yeah, sure. So I was like, this is so easy. I can do this. All I have to do is make friends. So I had a podcast, but that's all I did. I didn't do anything. I post anything. I didn't know about that. I was like, They heard me. Why shouldn't they hear me? It made sense, right?
Well, let me ask you this. Once you went through your group of friends who had podcast shows and you started reaching out to show hosts, what was your success rate?
Well, I was very encouraged and proud. So I went to different, you know, how you can go on the internet and find different, mm-hmm. And with shame and guilt, I have a topic that can fit anywhere. I mean, really. So it was easy to find that show hosts. And I did type and said something, I'm great. You know, this is what I can do for you, and so forth and so on. And I don't know how many I said that, but it was quite a lot because I'm very detail oriented. So I had 100% rejection.
Aha, I love that. Not that you got rejected, but, you know, actually we were having a conversation before we went live, and you were saying, yeah, I reached out to a lot of hosts and kept getting no after no after no. And then you joined the Podcast Rockstar Club.
Well, no.
Okay.
There's a little segue there.
Okay.
Remember, this is 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
So I was listening to one of my dearest mentors on the internet, and she had, she always has a featured guest, not always, but she mentioned your name. And I went, what the heck? And she gives it free. What do I have to lose? So I listened to you and I went, oh my God, I like you because you're simple, you're easy, and you say it directly. You don't give me the 10 yards about this and this. I hate the waste time. So you're like a time expert person. So I listened to you and I went, maybe I can learn something. I listened to everything you broadcast at least 2 or 3 times and for a year.
Wow.
Because the beauty is that you kept on saying it. And to a person like me who doesn't really understand the racetrack, I had to hear it many times.
Right.
because my mind doesn't work that my way. So I needed to hear steps and steps. So I went, I think I'm going to try. So what I did was I printed out what you said and put it on my wall so I could even see it, because it was important for me to see it, because I have dyslexia, have all these, visual problems, which makes me more susceptible to get information from other unknown sources. Anyway,
Right.
I would have to paste it up and see the steps as what you said, and I printed it out. Not that it was complex, it was just a roadmap that I never knew before.
Okay. And I want to point one thing out to people, and why I'm such a stickler on people really going out there and getting that visibility. Because Lois, you heard of me from somebody else, and that has to do with how visible I am. And it's not because I'm so smart, it's because I'm so persistent. And you, in the time since now, when did you join the podcast Rockstar Club?
Okay. So the segue is, you kept on talking about foundation and website and everything. I'm going, and I had joined a group 4 years ago, and they never mentioned that to the end. It was like, my website was archaic because I didn't have a niche group. I didn't have the sign-ups, and I didn't have the what do you call it? The things to give away, and that
the ethical bribe. The ethical bribe.
We're talking 6 to 8 months I worked on this website, and it was believe me, I worked very, very hard on it. So you had the momentum, you had that 1 month thing going where you would help people with and I said, I want to join, but I don't have a website. So how stupid is that? How can I send people to something that's not right?
Right.
It doesn't make sense. And that's where my problem was. So it took me 6 to 8 months to get my foundation ready.
Okay.
So when you said I have a rock star community, I went, hello, I'm ready.
Wonderful.
The bell rang and the horse got out of the stall.
Awesome.
So
maybe we need to go to the racetrack, because you've mentioned racetrack, you've mentioned horses, you mentioned.
I like horses.
Okay. Well, and
like
we have
animals.
3 of them. We have 3 of them. So my question is, when did you join the podcast Rockstar Club?
Was that like 6 weeks when you first opened it up? Was that 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks?
Oh gosh, it's probably been about 3 or 4 months. It started when the shutdown happened. I actually had to pivot my business, and I started looking at what was going on in my business as a keynote speaker. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't go out to conferences.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember.
And so, the point I really want to stress for people is that even though I've been in business for 26 years now, when the pandemic hit and the shutdown happened, I was impacted. I mean, I was impacted dramatically. And I had a few choices. And my choice was, how do I make my information as available as possible, cost effectively as possible, and really get people who are going to take action. So once you joined,
so it's 2 months, I would say 2 months.
Okay. And in 2 months, let me run these numbers. You've gotten 20 bookings. So I really want people to hear this. In a 2-month period of time, going from only having interviewed with
100%.
100% rejection. Okay. Now you have 20 bookings. Out of that, you've done 11 interviews, and 5 of those have gone live. So those are phenomenal numbers. What would you say? So for the people that are in the group that haven't taken action yet, they haven't even dug into the content, because I know who's dug in and I know who hasn't. And what would you say to those people who are sitting on the fence and they've made the investment, but they're not doing anything? What do they need to do to get started?
I believe I had so many years of wanting and wanting and wanting, and this is my destiny. It isn't like a job. So I found I'm hungry. I'm a hungry guest. You can put it that way. So I'm willing to do, and that you can't make.
Right.
You can't read it. You can't. It's inside of you. So my drive is me. Like if I'm a car salesman, I'll sell a lot of cars if I believe that.
Right.
It's my drive. So I believe that, and also my work is shame and guilt. So I've done my homework for 15 years. So the shame and guilt is lower. I'm not saying I don't have any. It's much
Hmm.
lower. So I don't care to be rejected because it's like, oh, thanks God, I'm not supposed to go there. I don't. I put another spin on that. I don't have the fear, and then
Okay.
um, that's the problem that people have is the shame and guilt that's holding them back.
Well, something that you mentioned, and we, for those who wonder where I'm getting this information, Lois and I had a conversation before we went live, and I asked her a few questions. And you said you did step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Let's start with the real basics. What does somebody who's in the Podcast Rockstar Club need to do to just get started? What would be the very first thing that you would recommend to them if they came to you and said, "Tell me"?
Are you committed?
Okay. Okay. So they say, yes, I'm committed. Now what?
Okay. What do you want to tell people? Why are you doing this?
Okay. So was
What
that a big turning point for you when you really got clear on what you want to tell people, what your message is?
I had to put it in words because I
Okay.
knew internally what I want to do, but I had to make it user friendly. Like
Well,
you, marketing, you have to make it.
yeah. And one thing you mentioned was about the email that you sent out to host. Tell me your process before you even reach out to a host now. You went from 100% rejection to now you're hitting home run after home run. What are you doing that in your email message, in your research, all of that?
Okay, I have a 95% acceptance at this point.
Wow.
And the people that don't, that the extra 5% or 10%,
Hmm.
they'll say, I want you on my show, but I don't have room yet. So I have a file later. So I'm still using them if I
Okay.
need them.
Okay.
So what I do is, first of all, I watch a show. Okay, I can't watch the whole show. I'm
Right.
more of that time. So and I'm very blessed to find something that's a nugget. Like
Okay.
there was a, for example, can I give an example?
Please do. Please do.
Okay, the person with eating disorders, I reached out to them and they wanted me to say. So what I said to them was, I watched your show,
Hmm.
and John Smith, who was speaking, gave the information that people have to fill up themselves because they feel empty.
Hmm.
And he didn't elaborate. He just said that's the reason why people feel they're not filled because they feel empty,
Right.
so forth and so on. So I used that in the podcast. I said, thank you so much, John Smith, for telling us the information about being empty. If you would like to know more information, I could elaborate on the emptiness. The
Perfect.
emptiness is a presence of shame and guilt.
Perfect. So what you did, you basically took something verbatim from the show, you incorporated it into your outreach email, which showed the host. And as a host of 2 shows, this is very important to me. You showed the host that you paid attention to their show, you paid attention to things that were being said, and you did your research. I had somebody just yesterday who we set up a pre-interview, and the reason, excuse me, the reason I do pre-interviews for my plant-based eating show is people have to be 100% plant-based. I don't know how many times I've said that, and yet I have people that
Oh,
try
yeah,
to sneak in and
of
they go,
course.
well, I'm 90%. And yesterday I had a gentleman on my call and I said, first question before we go any further. And he had a phenomenal topic to speak about. I said, are you 100% plant-based vegan? He goes, no. And I said, we can end this conversation because you have to be on my show. He goes, well, I wish you would have told me. And I was shocked because as a host, if anybody says that to a host, that's not the best approach,
You got,
because I
yeah,
have it on my podcast page on Apple Podcast. I have it on my blog. I mean, it's all over the place.
I
And
know
so
that's
for
what
him to
happened.
put it, yeah, for him to
Yeah.
blame it on the host. So now that you are hitting a home run, I do have a few questions coming through.
Can I bring
Uh,
up one point,
yeah, and then I'm
Kathy?
going to ask you some questions, but go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead.
The problem I have, and this goes for a lot of other people who are just starting. Oh, I truly don't have a huge email list. I mean, like I have it in the hundreds, but it's not in the thousands.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they want people in the thousands. and they want, 500 podcasts and so forth and so on, the bigger shows. And I feel ready for a little bigger show now because I've done a
Right.
lot of the smaller ones, and you need to grow, and I'm growing.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell these hosts, thank you so much for taking the time to read my email. I'm so gracious. I always start with thank you. Then I say, as you can see, my social media numbers are not extremely high at this point because I have just begun my shame guilt information because the COVID virus has turned everything upside down. Now it's
Right.
a hot topic. However, what I am telling you is information that you're not going to get any other place. So this is a big 5-star to your audience. Forget about the SEO. My SEO is building as I'm speaking.
Right.
And I'm helping you to become a 5-star episode because you're giving information that people aren't going to get any other place.
Well, and I love your transparency and your honesty because as a host, to me, I would rather somebody say, hey, look, I'm just starting out, but I'll do everything I can to help promote the show. And that works better for me than somebody who's got a huge following. They say, I'm not doing a darn thing. So we had one question come in from Elizabeth Larson. She says, how much time per week do you spend on getting your bookings?
Well, I spend all my time on podcasts.
Okay.
So bookings is kind of like eating. It isn't like scheduled. It's like, oh, I feel to do this. And then what happens is I see a topic and I go, oh my goodness, this is so great. So I look for a topic for that. So it isn't,
Okay.
I interweave it in my work.
Okay.
It isn't like I spend from 2 to 4 doing podcasts, what do you call it?
Research.
Research.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, Lois. If you were to pick a number, and before I continue on, I want to say this is Kathleen Gage with Podcast Rockstar Club, and I'm interviewing Lois Hollis, who is a shame and guilt expert who has gone from getting 0 bookings on podcast shows to in less than a 2-month period. She went from not knowing how to do it to learning how to do it through the Podcast Rockstar Club to booking 20 shows. She's already interviewed on 11 of those 20, and 5 of those have aired in less than 8 weeks. So if you think this stuff works, you're right. It does work. So Lois, if you were to pick a number, how much time would you say you spend a week? Is it an hour, 2 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours? If you just had to come up with a number.
It's very difficult. This is my work. This is my
Right,
life. So
right.
I wake up, ready to go, and I have these thoughts in my head that I have to write right away because
Okay.
I can't lose them.
Right.
So I start right away and do my work, and then I'm really I would say at least 8 hours a day.
Okay. Well,
Maybe.
and
It's a full-time job, but
Yeah.
it's not a job to me. It's my life.
and I
wouldn't
get
do
that.
anything else.
And
I wouldn't
that's
do
the
anything
thing that I really encourage people to look at is how important is your message to get out to market? And then it just becomes second nature. Another question that Liz has is, what do you have an offer that you give the audience on podcast shows? And if so, how do you introduce that? Do you wait for the host to ask, or do you just
Well, I
put it
do
out?
it 2 ways because I feel it's necessary. Like you said, you do it at the end, but in my talking of shame and guilt, I tell people I have an ebook on my website,
Okay.
and it's called 500 Questions, One Answer.
Hmm.
And the ebook is too long to make it one download because
Okay.
I think you would just like throw it away. So I
Okay.
have 20 segments of 25 questions. So you're
Okay.
going to get an email for months. And this is part of the education. People have asked me questions. I love questions. I love to answer questions. So this is my education. So I'm telling people that if you do nothing else, just go to my ebook get it and start reading it. And then you'll understand more than I could say in this 15 minutes.
Okay. So I want to take a step back, and I encourage, Liz goes, cool book name. I encourage questions. So post it in the comments area underneath the video that's live right now. How important was it for you to get your foundation in place before you really went full board ahead with the interviews?
There's no percentage. If you don't do a foundation, don't bother.
Okay, great. And how much of the podcast Rockstar Club training, there's all the modules in the back. How much of that would you say that you've gone through?
Well, I went through it, but Kathleen, I went through you a year before that. So you essentially combined it all very nicely in the group, but I really learned it beforehand. What I see you doing was, from all your teachings of 2 and 3 years that I've been listening to you, you put in the Rockstar Club. But I got it little at a time, which I need it. I need it a little bit at a time.
Well, let me ask you this. If there were anything else you needed to know that would benefit you in the podcast Rockstar Club, what would that thing be? What's one piece of information or one subject that you feel would be added value for you to learn?
For me to learn is really about the host, because I also I have 5 Facebook groups that I go to.
Okay.
And a couple more just for podcasters.
Okay.
That is so cool, because I don't post because I'm not a podcaster. I just say I'm thinking about, because I may have my show one day.
Right.
I'm not at this point, believe me. But I'm listening to the host, and the host is really important to know and to understand. Another thing that really helped me was the week that I joined your club, your community club, was the weekend that there was a Podfest. The Podfest was global. It was the Guinness record of attendees.
Okay.
On my cell phone, like here on my cell phone, there was 1,200 people talking.
Wow.
Okay, that was their app, and I am not a tech person.
Right.
I'm 7. I'm just like, but I learned how to talk to these 1,200 people.
Okay.
And on my computer, I'm doing master classes, all free.
Wonderful.
That ignited me because I was talking to host. Hi, how are you? I'm Lois. I'm George. I'm starting. I said, I'm starting too. So this is how I really started, because I was talking to them. But that was your teaching again. Get in touch with the host, make contact. Right.
Because it is about relationships.
It's all relationship based.
Okay. And I have another question. This comes in from Debbie, and she says, what did the host say to you when you said you didn't have social media? And before you answer that, I want to say, as a host, and I've got 2 shows, and my plant-based eating for health show is taking off like wildfire. I just this morning interviewed the top fitness guru in India, not in Indiana, in India. And she found my podcast show. She approached me. And here's the thing, as a host, I would much rather have somebody who is really committed to their message, they're aligned with it, and they'll do what they can with what they have, rather than somebody who has a massive following and they don't do a darn thing, and they think that it's my privilege to be interviewing them, which it is. As a host, it's always a privilege to interview a guest, but arrogance doesn't go very far with hosts.
That's what arrogance is, shame and guilt.
Okay, so let's talk about what did the host say when you said you didn't have a big social media following?
I've said that to 4 hosts now, because I'm getting bigger shows. They never said anything. They just said, I have sent you my calendar. Please fill in so I can interview you.
You just hit on something. You said, I'm getting bigger shows. You start right where you are. This is for everybody. If you're worried about your numbers right now, get on shows, do a great job, do a bang up job, and hosts will start hearing you and they'll start approaching you. So talk about the ascension from when you got your very first show. Was it did you have fear come up? Were you excited about it? Were you concerned about it? And then where you are now to the type of shows that you're now getting.
The first show I did, I was the only fear I have is, my God, the tech's not going to work.
Okay.
That's
We
my
went through
fear.
that this morning.
Okay, so I have an internet cable of 8 feet in case the internet goes. I'm little town
Right.
Waynesville. I'm in the mountains. Okay, I have
Okay.
another computer with Zoom on it with you, because I don't know. I'm tech, because it's happened.
Absolutely.
And so that's my only fear.
Okay. Okay.
That's my only fear, because
Now, what
I'm
about,
just so grateful to give my message out.
I love that. And that's really
So
where the
it's the
opportunity
commitment.
resides. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So
commitment. How
are you
grateful are
noticing,
you?
are you noticing a difference in the types of shows that you're getting on now
Well,
compared to early on?
they're a little bit more, what do you do? What have you done? And all
Okay.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And that's fine, because I tell them what I do and what I don't do. And I'm making a movie in January. So I'm seeding that every time I do a podcast.
What's the
That
movie you're making?
It's called I'm Good. It's about making shame and guilt visible. I
Perfect.
mean,
Okay.
somebody's got to do it, right?
Absolutely. And I've got a question from Tom and Dr. Sims. Where and how did you find the podcasts that are most likely to accept you as a guest? Where do you get your greatest result?
There is no answer to that, because I go to I found, okay, the Podfest thing.
Mhm.
That can you imagine talking to 1,100 people that
Right,
have a podcast?
right,
I mean, seriously,
right.
you got to get somebody. So then I saw everybody says, oh, you got to go here, you got to go there. It's a line you follow. So I followed the line. I saw 4 or 5 Facebook groups, and then also there's a lot of guesting things going out, like
Mhm.
Podfest and
Mhm.
all Podit and all that.
Pod it and
Yeah,
podcast and
I found the
yeah.
Facebook's much more helpful. But again, you may not. It's you. Every person, you're unique, and no one
Excellent.
can tell you where to go. Now, you, Kathleen, do the in your teachings talk about how to find them on Spotted and Apple and so forth.
Mhm.
I haven't reached that yet, because I've been so busy with what I have
I
that
love
I
it.
can't get there yet.
Well,
But
you
it's
know,
on the list. It's
and
on the list.
it
I
goes
can't.
to show that the action, it gets the result. I mean, and I'm glad you said that, because each person is different, and somebody who might have a great result with finding opportunities on Apple Podcast, somebody else may not. They may find it in podit.net. Debbie asks a question, and Debbie, I need you to clarify this a bit, because I'm not quite sure what you mean. You wrote, did you have to turn down a host? And are you meaning, was it that a host came to you and it just wasn't a fit and you said no? If you could clarify that question, Debbie, that would be great.
I'm okay. I can answer it. I
Okay.
know what she's saying. I never had a problem with the host. I just don't see where there would be a problem. The only problem I had was, oh, I love your topic, but I don't have room right now. I said,
Right.
okay, I'll put you on the to call list. There is one problem I did have, but it's kind of solved, is that and I think I spoke with this about the community, is that the show notes were not completely accurate. Okay, they weren't damaging,
Okay.
they didn't hurt me, but I am speaking my truth about shame and guilt, and I will never let someone say something that is untrue that I
Right.
said. That's my integrity.
Right.
So I said, this is what you need to say. But to my knowledge, they have not redid it. And it's still okay. It's not a
Right.
problem in life. So I went on their Facebook page and I said, here is the corrected script. And I wrote it. Because they didn't write it, I wrote it.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then I unfriended the person, and I will not list their podcast on my website.
Okay. Which
That's
is definitely your prerogative. And let's
And that's
see.
okay. I mean, it was a very small podcast, but it didn't matter. If it was a big one, I don't care. because I want
Absolutely.
equity.
Absolutely.
Like you're plant-based, this is what it is, and this is what I say, and you got to write that.
Well, and it's so interesting because what people don't realize that go on shows is that we have what's called an edit button. And if somebody says something on my show that just does not align with what I'm trying to put out to my community, I mean, if they say anything that is not compassion to animals or whatever on that particular show, trust me,
I do.
And well, here's the question that came from Debbie. And I think this is interesting because I think I know the answer to this already, but did you have a host that was going to speak most of the time and you wouldn't get to speak but 5 minutes? And I can't see that happening with you, Lois, that a host would take over and you wouldn't be able to get a word in edgewise.
Oh, I know how to fix that. Ask them a question.
Perfect. Okay. And Pat Musser says, gotta love the edit button. Absolutely. And also realize that if the episode is recorded and you've upset the host in any way, and most hosts are just like you and I, it's like we're just people. And yet every so often you get somebody who might be super arrogant as a guest, or they might have their own agenda, and you don't have to air the show, period. End of story. As a host, we're not obligated to air the show. But the more communication you have with a host, the better. What I like to do with my guests is I do like to have a pre-interview conversation. And the reason for that, unless I know who they are, like if Rich Roll said, I'd like to come on your show, trust me, I do not need to have a pre-conference interview with him or a pre-conversation because I know who he is. I'm very familiar with his work. I have a gentleman that I'm having on very soon that is very well known in the plant-based industry. And I said, we booked you on a conversation prior to the interview. Let's just do the interview. I know you. I tell my guests who are big name people, I say, I'm your stalker. I'm your number one stalker. And they know that I'm saying it in humor. But let's see if there's any other questions. Bam. Okay. Any other questions? As a guest, I get frustrated when the host does pretty much all the talking, almost to prove to me that they know more, like what? And which is true. You occasionally, here's one that I got that's a real bait and switch. I had a host who invited me on his show. We had a great interview, and he said, would you like to do a, what's the word when after the fact you review what you've done? There's a word for it and I can't think of it right now. Anyway, I said, sure. Well, we get on this call after the fact and he said, you did really good here, here, and here. And by this point I had already probably done 100 interviews. So it wasn't like I was green. And he goes, where you could have improved was this, this, and this. I said, okay, thank you. And he goes, by the way, I coach people and for just $5,000, I'll coach you. And I thought, bait and switch. And then I found out that was his MO. That's how he got his customer
base. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Yeah. So Debbie wants to know, will this be on replay? I'd like to listen again for my training. I do plan to have this on replay. We've been recording. Other questions? Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions come through. I have two computers going. Yes, Lois.
I have something to say. There are two people bigger shows that have wanted me to fill out the forms because they're very intrigued with my topic and they want me to speak, but I got to fill out the form and do all the stuff. I have not done that for them because I feel like I would encroach upon their teaching. I'm in the wellness industry. So they have their own way of healing.
Okay.
And I'm saying, I'm bringing shame and guilt in. It can really help. They don't want to hear that.
Okay.
Because they want to promote their own product. And you can see that when I go on people's websites, I can see if they're a coach for this and this is their products. They sell their coaching, they sell their books, they sell their sessions. I don't go there because they don't really want to hear this. Now, a year from now, they're going to want to hear it because it's going to be more widespread. I tell people, this is shame and guilt. I am not saying you should not do your essential oils and essential coaching. I'm saying that you can introduce this concept into your teaching and your coaching because you will only get so far unless you do shame and guilt work. You
Okay.
will never
And
make a home run. So I
well,
make
you
it
may,
very clear. I'm not in competition with you.
right. And you bring up a really good point, which is you don't have to say yes to every opportunity that comes along.
Exactly.
You really have to be in alignment. For example, if somebody wanted me on a nutrition show and, I would be really hard pressed to be on a show with other people who promote animal-based eating. I just
Well, of
would.
course. Yeah.
And now, when it comes to business, I can be on a number of different types of shows because my show, Power Up for Profits, that primarily right now is being used to teach people about visibility. So, you really have to weigh the pros and cons to what your choices are, if it's aligned with your values and what your long-term vision is. Speaking of which, Lois, and first of all, thank you so much for jumping in. It's so interesting because I sent this message out to quite a few people that had expressed an interest. You were the first one to respond. No wonder you've got 20 interviews that you've booked. No wonder you've already done. You've got to be quick. You got to take advantage of that opportunity. So as you look to the future, where do you see yourself in a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road as a result of all the visibility that you're getting with podcast interviews?
My main objective is to be an influencer. So I want to be able to be, and that's happening now. I'm being invited to shows and from people that I don't even know.
Okay.
So I see this in 4 to 5 months. People are just going to call for, please interview me, please interview me.
So they're coming to you. So
one or two. It's not
okay.
like it's not.
Well, it will. Trust me. I mean, with 20 under your belt. Okay. And when you look at the numbers, only 5 have aired, and this is already happening. I mean, and then we do have another question from Linda. Did you send your one sheet on the initial contact or just reach out to the host casually first?
I spent so much time on that one sheet. And I talked to you about it. Remember, I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't. And I got this perfect, gorgeous one sheet. And guess what? Nobody has ever asked for it. I'm like, but I have it.
Well, and let me tell you, not just you, Lois, but everybody, why a one sheet is a good idea. It helps you to organize your thoughts because so often when somebody first sends me their information on a one sheet, they're all over the place. They have 20,000 topics they talk on. Trust me, when I was first a keynote speaker, at one point, I seriously had 50 topics that I talked on, and I wasn't getting hired. And the reason being is I was confusing meeting planners. Now it's boiled down to 2 topics.
And that's why it took me 6 to 7, 8 months to do my website.
Well, and that's the thing for those of you who send a host a whole bunch of information to start with, don't. This is the initial meeting. So Linda, in response to your question from a host's perspective, be casual at first. Oftentimes you can find somebody on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and many times people introduce you. The woman who I had on my show this morning, I had reached out to somebody who I knew was vegan. I said, I would be interested in having you on my show. He goes, I don't really do shows, but I have somebody I'd like to introduce you to. One thing led to another. She's going to be aired next week. And then we have a question from Anna. How often are you on shows? And do you have a weekly? Okay, you might have missed that part, Anna, but Lois just does this as a part of her everyday activity. She doesn't schedule out time necessarily. She just looks for those opportunities. But how often are you on shows, would you say?
Well, it varies, especially at this point, because I had so much in the beginning, I had to organize. I mean, I was losing it because I had to post it, I had to list it, I had to remember it, I had to, so I tried to make my next month not as busy because I'm losing ground and I don't want to lose what the goal that I do have.
I'm glad you said that. And here's a question that I'm going to step back. I'm going to let you answer from an expert who's been getting a lot of opportunities and find out what your perspective on this is. If you don't hear back from an email requesting to be a guest, can you email again in 2 weeks as a follow-up, or is that too aggressive?
I've sent 3 to 4 post and thank you so much. I believe there's a tech monster out there, and with the bigger shows you're not dealing with the host, you're dealing with the secretary to the producer. So you're doing 4 people.
Correct.
And that's what I just keep, until
Thank
they
you.
say no, I don't have any problem. Hello, hello.
And the thing is, in answer to your question, Heidi, I would say give it probably 4 or 5 days from the first one to your next one, not 2 weeks, because the fact is that some host gets so many requests that it gets lost in the shuffle. It could be that they intended on responding and they just got caught up with something
Oh,
else.
yeah.
And so it's like what Lois said. They thank you for that reminder. So don't feel like you're being too aggressive. Just know that if you've got a message that people need to hear and they're a good fit, be proactive, not aggressive, be proactive. So let's see if there's any other questions before we wrap up.
I have something to add to that.
Please do. Please do.
I just received an email from the person that I wanted to get on the show because I feel it's a perfect match. Was the third time that I had contacted her. So she said, "Oh, thank you so much for reaching out." And it was on a Saturday evening, so she knows she works nice. So she said, "I'm sending it on to the producer because I feel that we want you on the show, etc." So what I did was I copied the producer's name and the show name, and I sent it to them both. And I said, "Thank you so much for your interest." Whenever you get another email from the host company or a secretary, use it.
Excellent.
Hello. Thank you
Excellent.
so much.
Excellent.
I know you're busy and understand. And anything that I can do to make that easier, please let me know.
Excellent.
And I always give them 2 emails.
Perfect. Perfect. And, being proactive is important, having your foundation in place. Lois had been following me for a while, so she knew a lot of my training. But for those of you who have not even cracked open the training, I encourage you go in the back end. And for those of you who might hear this that are not members of the Podcast Rockstar Club, I will put the link below, powerupforprofits.com/podcast rockstar. And Lois, I want to thank you so much for sharing your experience. You're just out there being a rock star. And in closing, do you have any final thoughts?
It didn't cost me any money.
To get
what I've done
cost
nothing.
The training program did, but this is the most cost-effective marketing strategy that you can use. I mean, hello, it's like for real.
Okay, now I have a sort of a friend that's Facebook. I mean, her specialty is Facebook, which is a good thing. And I've copped her a few times. And she said, "Well, right now I'm doing my own SEO. And for $3,000, I'm doing this. And for $4,000, I'm doing that. I'm taking this course. I'm getting this monitor on and this one on that." I'm going, "Oh my God, I don't have $10,000. I'm putting that in my movie." And you know what? I got more publicity out of doing it my way because of the personal relationships.
Absolutely.
Not an SEO guru sitting in wherever. So it's about hard work, but I don't see it hard work because this is my work. This is my life. So
I love it.
That's where the commitment comes in. If you're in it, you're in it. And if you're not, you're not. That's it. It's just easy.
Well, thank you so much, Lois. It's been delightful. And for everybody who's been on the live, thank you so much. And for the rest of you, you'll be getting the replay on this. I just encourage you, go out, get visible, get your message out there. And right now, regardless of what your topic is, there's a really good chance that it's going to help people. And if you believe in what you're doing, you owe it to yourself and to your community to get your message out in the biggest way possible. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.